Christmas morning arrived pale and cold, the kind of winter day where the sun hung low but stubbornly bright, refusing to surrender to the frost. On the edge of the city park, where bare trees cast long shadows on frozen paths, a young woman sat alone in a weathered wheelchair, her breath fogging the air as she stared at families passing by with wrapped gifts and flushed faces. Her name was Maribel Voss, and she had learned long ago that holidays were not measured by calendars but by absence. Absence of warmth, absence of company, absence of hope. The city hummed with celebration, yet she felt invisible, like a forgotten ornament tucked away in a dusty box. Her coat was thin, her gloves mismatched, and the coins in her pocket clinked softly when she shifted, reminding her how little she had and how heavy life had become since the accident that stole her ability to walk and the fire that took her home. That morning, hunger gnawed at her stomach, but what hurt more was the certainty that no one would notice if she vanished from that bench forever. Before the story unfolds any further, if you believe that kindness can offer second chances and that small acts can change lives, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Journal. Your support helps keep stories like this alive, reminding the world that compassion still matters. Maribel had not always been this woman wrapped in layers of survival. Once, she had been a pastry assistant in a corner bakery, waking before dawn to knead dough and dust sugar over warm bread. The accident came on a rainy afternoon when a delivery truck skidded through a red light, crushing her small car and rearranging her future in a single, merciless second. Hospital walls became her horizon for months, then shelters, then the slow unraveling of friendships that did not know how to stay. By the time Christmas returned, she had learned to endure pitying glances and to avoid mirrors. That day in the park, she watched children pull sleds and parents laugh loudly, and she told herself to be grateful for daylight and the fact that her hands still worked. She adjusted the frayed blanket on her lap and tried to remember the smell of cinnamon and butter, but memory only sharpened the ache. The city park was busiest near noon, when the sun was strongest and church bells echoed faintly from downtown. That was when Maribel noticed a little girl breaking away from a family cluster near the fountain. The child moved with determined steps, her red scarf bouncing against a green coat, her boots leaving messy prints in the thin snow. The girl stopped in front of Maribel, studying her with a seriousness that made Maribel uncomfortable. She was used to adults pretending not to see her, not to children looking directly into her eyes. Maribel lowered her gaze, bracing herself for the familiar sting of embarrassment or rejection. Instead, the girl tilted her head as if considering something important, her cheeks rosy from the cold, her eyes bright with curiosity rather than fear. Maribel felt a tightening in her chest, unsure why this small presence felt heavier than all the indifference she had endured. The girl's name was Anika Rowan, and she had been taught, not through lectures but through example, that no one should sit alone on Christmas. Her family had gathered every year around a crowded table, where extra chairs were never questioned and stories spilled over plates. As Anika stood there, she sensed the quiet sadness radiating from the woman in the wheelchair, a sadness that felt wrong on a day meant for light. The girl glanced back at her family, who were laughing and debating where to eat lunch, then returned her gaze to Maribel with an expression that held no doubt. When Anika spoke, her voice was clear and unafraid, asking a simple question that would ripple through the rest of the day and beyond. It was not framed as charity or obligation, but as an invitation, as natural as breathing. For Maribel, that question landed like a sudden warmth against frozen skin. She struggled to respond, her thoughts colliding with years of rejection and the instinct to refuse anything that might later be taken away. She imagined the stares, the discomfort, the way people might look at her chair before her face. She thought of how long it had been since anyone had wanted her presence rather than tolerated it. Her hands trembled as she considered the possibility that this was a mistake or a fleeting whim. Yet something in Anika's calm confidence cut through her defenses. The little girl did not see a burden or a problem to solve. She saw a person who should not be alone. Maribel nodded slowly, her throat tight, agreeing before fear could steal the moment. Anika's family noticed the change in direction almost immediately. Her parents, Soraya and Nathaniel Rowan, followed her gaze and then her path, concern flickering briefly before being replaced by understanding. They approached Maribel with a gentleness that did not patronize, introducing themselves as if meeting an old friend rather than a stranger in a park. They asked about accessibility, about what Maribel might need, about her comfort. No one rushed. No one spoke over her. The walk to their nearby apartment was slow but steady, the winter sun guiding them through streets lined with decorated windows and wreaths. Neighbors smiled as they passed, unaware that something quietly extraordinary was unfolding in their midst. The Rowan apartment was modest but warm, filled with the scent of roasting vegetables and baked bread. Daylight streamed through the windows, catching on tinsel and handmade ornaments. Maribel was guided to the table, where an extra place had already been set, as if it had been waiting for her all along. As the meal unfolded, stories replaced silence. Maribel found herself laughing at small mishaps, listening to Anika recount school adventures with exaggerated seriousness, and feeling something inside her loosen. She spoke of the bakery, of the accident, of the long road that followed, and she realized no one was uncomfortable hearing the truth. The food was simple but nourishing, each bite carrying a sense of belonging she had forgotten was possible. As the afternoon wore on, the light outside softened, but the day remained bright in spirit. After the dishes were cleared, Anika brought out a small box of craft supplies, insisting on making decorations together. Maribel's hands, once skilled with pastry tools, moved carefully but confidently, shaping paper and ribbon into something cheerful. It had been so long since she had created anything purely for joy. The Rowans listened as Maribel spoke about her search for work and housing, offering not promises but connections, ideas, and something even more valuable, belief. They did not see her situation as a permanent label but as a chapter still being written. Christmas afternoon drifted toward evening, and Maribel felt the familiar fear of endings creep in. She wondered what would happen when she returned to the shelter, when the warmth faded back into memory. Sensing her unease, Soraya pressed a small card into Maribel's hand, explaining that it held contact information and an open invitation. Not just for holidays, but for ordinary days too. Nathaniel spoke of a friend who ran a community bakery program, one that valued experience over speed. Anika hugged Maribel without hesitation, her small arms fierce in their sincerity. In that moment, Maribel understood that while charity feeds the body, inclusion feeds the soul. If this story is touching your heart, if it reminds you of the power of simple kindness and human connection, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps spread these messages further than you might imagine. When Maribel returned to the shelter that night, the cold felt different. She replayed the day in her mind, each detail glowing with a significance she could hardly believe. Over the following weeks, the promises made around that table became reality. A part-time position opened up at the community bakery, adapted to her needs. Soraya helped her navigate housing resources, and Nathaniel accompanied her to appointments when paperwork felt overwhelming. Most importantly, the Rowans treated her not as a project but as family. Christmas had been a doorway, but what followed was a steady path toward dignity and independence. Months later, on another bright winter day, Maribel rolled past the same park bench where she had once sat alone. She did not stop there anymore. Instead, she continued on, carrying a box of pastries destined for a community event, her hands steady, her heart full. She thought of Anika's fearless question and how it had cracked open a future she thought was sealed shut. She knew that not every story unfolded this way, but she also knew that every act of kindness carried the potential to rewrite someone's life. Before this story ends, please leave a heartfelt comment below and share your thoughts, your experiences, or simply a message of kindness. Your words matter more than you know. As the sun climbed higher and the city buzzed with life, Maribel smiled, understanding at last that hope does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes in the form of a small voice, a shared meal in daylight, and the courage to ask someone to belong.